Hello, welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called Them or Us, My Gateway to Frank Zappa. Right? I often feel that Zappa gets left out on my channel. You know, very early on when I formed this channel, I did a video that was called The Four Titans. And they're the four artists on which my channel rests. One's John McLaughlin, one's Miles Davis, one's John Coltrane, and one's Frank Zappa. And as time's gone on, you know, we got into progressive rock, we got into all these other things. I like to return, if I can. John Coltrane, I need to return to him. I've only really done one video on John Coltrane. I've done hundreds on John McLaughlin. I've done quite a few on Miles. And I've done a few on Zappa. I did one recently where we looked at the Gary Panter albums. We looked at Studio Town, Orchestral Favourites of Sleep Dirt. It was an incredible thing because, you know, a few days later, Gary Panter put a comment on, if you go and check it out, it hasn't got his name, you have to read through and find it, but Gary Panter actually left a comment on this channel, which proves this channel is making its little inroads in, you know. So I thought that video went down well. So let's return to Frank Zappa, because there's a very long video on here where I try and go through all the Zappa albums and talk about them, and I missed an album off, and I've been reminded of this on the comments a few times, and it's ridiculous because what was left off was actually the album that got me into Frank Zappa. Now, I should hold the album up, but this album has travelled with me in so many places and gone to so many different houses that at some point I have lost the cover to this album. And all I'm left with are the inner sleeves. So those of you who know your Zappa now, there you'll see the inner sleeves of Them or Us by Frank Zappa. All right. Now, I can't actually remember the first time I heard Frank Zappa. I'm pretty sure this is the very first album I heard by Frank Zappa. But around the same time, I also heard Hot Rats. But I think, because we're going back 40 years, I think it goes like this. One night I'm listening to the Friday Night Rock Show, and Tommy Vance, the great Tommy Vance, who I once met, he came to a gig when I was playing with Robert Plant, and I managed to meet one of my big heroes, and probably the most important man in history to introducing me to all the music I listened to, which was Mr. Tommy Vance. And Tommy Vance, one night he played Call It Sleep by Steve Vai. And he mentioned that this guy was playing with Alcatraz, and he played with Frank Zappa. He hadn't played with Dave Roth at that point. I think this would have been around about 1983, but most likely 1984. I heard Call It Sleep, and I was just blown away by this guitarist. And so the search went to try and find this guitarist. I couldn't find a copy of Flexible, but I became aware that he was playing with Alcatraz, and I bought Disturbing the Peace, which is a great 80s rock album, and it deserves a video at some point, Disturbing the Peace was. But I realised that he had played with Frank Zappa. I had a friend at that time who played guitar, and we were sort of discovering a lot of this music together. And I played in the tape Steve Vai, so he was aware about this. So one Saturday morning, I get a call from him, and he said, I've just been downtown, and they had an album by that bloke Frank Zappa there. And I looked, and it got Steve Vai on it, and it had got a tune called Stevie Spankin' on there, which is all about Steve Vai. He said, but Andy, he called me Andrew actually, I wasn't called Andy till later. Andrew, you must come to my house. You have to hear this album. I'm like, why? What do you mean? He said, I'll put this album out. It's unbelievable. I've never heard anything like it. I've never heard anything like it. And I said, really? He said, yeah, you've got to come now. So I did the 2-mile walk from my house to his. And I sit down with a cup of tea, and he puts this album on, right? And I want to talk about this album. Right, so this album was made in around about 1984. Around about that time I first heard Steve Vai. It had obviously just come out, which is why it was in the record shops. It was interesting because most people bring single albums out, but Frank Zappa, he's brought this double album out. We don't know that he brings out these double albums all the time. So this is an absolute epic, you know. My mate's got it. I haven't got it. So I go around and he puts it on. And I'm going to pull out let's have a look at the actual vinyl. So side one starts up. And it starts up with The Closer You Are. Now, what world are we in? This is an out-and-out doo-wop track. I don't think it's... it's not. It's written by Earl Lewis and Bobby Robinson. God knows what doo-wop band they're from. Zappa was an absolute expert on doo-wop. I had a doo-wop compilation album. Zappa was involved in putting that together. And the Closer You Are is an absolutely perfectly executed doo-wop track. If you go back to Ruben the Jets, he does a whole album of doo-wop. But I think this is his best ever doo-wop track. It's absolutely perfect. And I'm sitting there going, well, this is interesting. I don't know whether I like this. It's like this weird rock and roll. All I knew back then was like Grease and things like that, Shawaddy Waddy. So I'm listening to this. And then the second track comes on. In France. This is a now completely different world. And he basically does this critique of the country France and French people. And it's funny. I'm looking at the guy on the cover. I'm looking at Frank Zappa on the cover, and I go, so is he like Weird Al Yankovic? That's what I thought. Is it sort of comedy music? Yeah, it's comedy, but it's quite funny. It's quite like, yeah, it's all right. This is weird. But That Closer You Are was not like that. And then Yehosna comes on. And Yehosna is completely different yet again. Yehosna is this huge, like almost like over a drum loop, this psychedelic track with all this weird backwards vocals flying around. And then the guitar solo comes in. Now, I think on here, that guitar solo was by Steve Vai. I'm hooked at that point. This like, oh my God, there's some Steve Vai on this. This is incredible. I'm now buying into Steve Vai, and Steve Vai is in an incredible situation. It's nothing like Disturbing the Peace, which I knew was a little bit of cheesy rock and roll. This is something else. This is weird and psychedelic. It's out there. It's like all the prog I like. It's just amazing. I'm blown away by Steve Vai at this point. And then we get this sort of classic rock track, Charlena. And there's a guitar solo on that. I think there's a guitar solo by Dweezil Zappa on there. But that side one, I'm really perplexed by this. I'm absolutely perplexed by what I'm listening to. And I can't pigeonhole it. But I think here's this comedy guy. It's like Weird Al Yankovic, and he's got Steve Vai on guitar. It's all a bit strange, and Steve Vai's amazing. And we slip it over. Now, what we got is two tracks. The first one's called Sinister Footwear Part 2, and the next track's called Truck Driver Divorce. Sinister Footwear Part 2 is just Zappa's compositions at the peak. It's utterly incredible. I've listened to Yes, I've listened to ELP. I have never heard anything like this. This is virtuosity at a level I have never, ever heard before. And even now, it seems incomprehensible to me. And they start playing these lines. It wasn't the black page for me. The thing where I came across that Zappa compositional approach where he uses that sort of mathematical density was Sinister Footwear Part 2. And this is just, and the world that he creates, it's like a new landscape, right? We've had sort of, not comedy, some of it's comedy, some of it's straight rock, some of it's weird and psychedelic. We've had that side one. You're in another world. That track for me, Sinister Footwear Part 2, is where I discovered Zappa and the genius of what he does and the uniqueness of what he does. And this is going on, it's going on, right? I had a band many years later, which was a sort of experimental fusion-y band, and it was called Sinister Footwear. That's the power that moment has for me in my Frank Zappa world. In the middle of all this beautiful but abstract, mathematical but harmonically beautiful music, suddenly this voice comes in. Truck driver divorce. And you're into this beat poetry, but it's about... is it funny? It's about a truck driver and he's away from home and he's not with his wife. And I didn't find it that funny. It was funny, but it was also sad. I'd never heard anything like this before. And it told a story. It critiqued a certain type of person. And Zappa was talking about just basic working class people on this track. After just doing some of the most sophisticated music, his music was highly sophisticated, but was not elitist and snobby. He just went beyond that. And I'm listening to this Truck Driver Divorce, and I'm going, oh my God, what this and this. It's just so strange. It's like a stream of consciousness, but the band is like, everything's so tight and arranged around this stream of consciousness. It's absolutely, I've never heard anything like this, right? And this then morphs into Truck Driver Divorce, and I can't hear the join. So what we've got here is my first Zappa long epic. I've always perceived side 2 of this album, Them or Us, as being this side long epic, and it's absolutely incredible. And then he goes into a long guitar solo. Zappa's done many guitar solos, some of them very beautiful, some of them very aggressive, some of them very abstract, right? But on Truck Driver Divorce, he goes into an area where for me, he is pushing at the very limits of jazz fusion, jazz rock improvisation, right? He pioneers this more and more as time goes on. I feel his guitar solos in the early days are very interesting. The guitar solos on Hot Rats are really interesting for the time. He's pushing the envelope. But he starts to develop a way of improvising using modes and using synthetic scales, which somehow relate to a modulated rhythm section where there is a sort of tempo, but the musicians can flit around that. Once Vinnie Colaiuta joins the band, Zappa's able to use his knowledge to forge a different way in which a rhythm section can improvise. It's different to bebop, it's different to modal improvisation, it's different to Coltrane, it's different. And this is going to set the blueprint. On this album, on Truck Driver Divorce, he's even pushing that approach even further out than even on Shut Up and Play Guitar with Vinny. And that's the first long guitar solo I ever heard. I can remember going back to my friend's house and putting that on over and over again. So you flip it over onto side 3, and we get Stevie spanking. There's a song about Steve Vai. There's 2 guitar solos. There's one by Steve Vai, which is astonishing, and there's another guitar solo by Dweezil Zappa. And we're looking up Dweezil. He's like, "How old's this kid? 13 years old. What's going on? How can this happen?" You know, it's very funny. And again, we have then Baby Take Your Teeth Out, which is another comedy song. It's very funny. I've always enjoyed humour in music. I'm not a musical snob, right? I don't react to it like many people do react to it. And then you have Marquis Son's Chicken. Again, incredible compositions. And then we end up with this 1 minute 40 Planet of My Dreams, which sounds like a song from the best musical that's never happened, right? Flip it over, and we have the last side. Be In My Video. He now starts taking a punch at MTV. He starts taking a punch at David Bowie. He's pulling the whole thing down. It's funny and it's true. I'm laughing, you know. It's cynical. I love that, you know. And then we have Them or Us, another incredible guitar solo. So there's incredible guitar solos on here. Frogs with Dirty Little Lips. If you really want to get into the trite, you know, if you really are that snobby that you can't take it, go and put on Frogs with Dirty Little Lips. Zappa can make a silly song like that, and it's full of hooks, and it's catchy, and it makes you smile. And he can do that after he's just done a track like Them or Us, where he's basically reinvented jazz fusion, invented guitar playing, reinvented everything. All that exists in Zappa's world. And then right at the end, he does an Allman Brothers song, Whipping Post, straight down the line. I think it's live. I can remember at the end of that when it finished, and then he introduces the band, and you think, well, was this album live or not? I don't know how much this album is. I'm pretty much sure that this album, I'm holding it up to black. It's like, you know, it's like Spinal Tap. He ends up with a classic rock song, you know. and he does it brilliantly. There's a reggae guitar solo. This album absolutely blew me away. I very hastily recorded it onto tape, and eventually, after many years, this is the album. This is my friend's album. I borrowed it so many times. I think he just let me have it because I was such a huge Zappa fan. This is where it all starts for me. I'm going to finish the video by reading out the only bit of text I've got to go on, which is the warning guarantee. At this time, Zappa was really involved in. He was like fighting against censorship on rock albums. You know, Tipper Gore was trying to. He had a crusade where they wanted to put warnings on the front of albums, which of course, putting a great big sticker on the front of the album really changes the artistic intent of the album fundamentally. Zappa, who was never one for censorship, found that very difficult. But on here, he does put his own warning stroke guarantee. Let's read this if I can read. It's very small, so my eyesight's not great. This album contains material which a truly free society would neither fear nor suppress. In some socially retarded areas, religious fanatics and ultra-conservative political organisations violate your First Amendment rights by attempting to censor rock and roll albums. We feel that this is unconstitutional and un-American. Right, here's Zappa's really arguing the point of what this album's about, you know, and what he's trying to do on here. There is offensive stuff on this album, and in many ways there's far more offensive stuff on this album than the Prince and Motley Crue albums that these people were trying to go after. But he was being ignored, you know, perhaps Frank felt a little bit left out. As an alternative to these government-supported programs designed to keep you docile and ignorant, Barking Pumpkin, which is his record label, is pleased to provide you stimulating digital audio entertainment for those of you who have outgrown the ordinary. At 15, 16 years old, that was precisely me. I had outgrown the ordinary. The language and concepts contained herein are guaranteed not to cause eternal torment in the place where the guy with the horns and the pointy stick conducts his business. Right? He's really linking, you know, the fact that it's unconstitutional to have political organisations so closely linked with religious organisations, and how that was affecting your constitutional rights in America. Something that we don't have in England because we don't have a constitution. We know we have the English aesthetic. That's our constitution. I'm sure Frank Zappa would have disagreed with that. And I know in an interview somewhere he said that us as a country, we would be better off if we had a constitution. He believed in the American way. He was not right-wing or left. I think he was a very centre-left and traditional person. My politics are very influenced by Frank Zappa, I must admit. It comes from this album. This album is about something, and those of you who think it's trite and shallow do not understand it. You're standing in a sort of elitist position where you think that you're going to make yourself better by looking cool and sophisticated. You know, and the fine young sophisticates, you know, Frank Zappa was always bringing them down. This guarantee is as real as the threats of the video fundamentalists who use attacks on rock music in their attempt to transform America into a nation of check-mailing nincompoops. In the name of Jesus Christ. If there is a hell, the fires await for them, not us. And there is the name of the album. This is an album for the freaks and weirdos. This is an album for the people out on the fringes. Now, why would Frank Zappa be now in today's climate? You know, who are the freaks and weirdos now? It's a question which I am not going to go into here. I miss him. I think we needed him. You know, we needed Frank. I think he really provided something in American culture which is not valued. It might not have come directly through him. It might come through the people he influenced, like, you know, Matt Groening and The Simpsons. A sneering cynicism which just keeps things in check. Anyway, I'm going to stick that back in there. That was my little video on Frank Zappa's album Them or Us, and how it was a gateway. I've told the story how it got me into Frank Zappa. I've since probably bought 80, 90, 100 albums by him. I got to see him in 1988 at Birmingham NEC on the 88 tour, which was the last tour. I was very lucky to see him then. If you scatter out elsewhere, you'll find I pull out a signed... shall I get it now? Shall we see if I can find it? Right. I'll see if I can find it, because I would like it on this video. So here in the corner of the room I have a box of bits. It's all full of bits, and I'm going to just jump into here. There's a lot of stuff from my time when I played with Frank Zappa. So this is like, I've got like, you know, like loads of passes from tours I did in this box. This is the bit that I'm always putting a bit on the end of the video, which is a bit unrelated, and that's what my new thing is. And I'm hoping it better be in here, because I'll have lost it if I was hoping it would be near the top, but it doesn't seem to be. I might have put it somewhere else for safekeeping. That's my downfall. Is it your downfall? You know, putting stuff safe for safekeeping and then it being continually lost forever. But in around about I think it was 89. I wrote to Frank Zappa. And I told him it was my birthday. Right. I'm so unprofessional on these videos. It's because I make up what I'm doing. I really don't know what I'm going to do. And after all this build-up, I might not find it. It doesn't seem to be emerging in here. And I thought this would be easier to get at now. It's just not. Oh, this is now. I've probably stored it away for safekeeping. I just cannot find it. I found a nice letter from Robert Plant here that he wrote me. No, I can't find it, but I basically somewhere... Here it is! It was right at the top. Right at the top. So yeah, in 1989, when I was 21, I think, or it could have been when I was 18, I can't remember. I wrote to Frank Zappa and I told him I was a massive fan, and it was my birthday, and I had a letter back from his secretary saying, and he had a little note saying happy birthday, and said Frank wanted you to have this, and I got that. A signed photo of Frank Zappa. And that's very treasured for me. I did put this up on my Facebook, and apparently there's quite a few people who had these. So he did quite a lot of these, but still, I still can't believe him. I mean, the guy's gone now, and there he is. You know, the thought that for like a few seconds of his life, he actually thought about my name. To Andrew. I told you I was called Andrew back then. Not Andy. I've come to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.